So to truly understand my journey as a parent, you have to understand the environment my daughter was born into, and not just my side of the family, but her mother's side as well. I'm sharing these details not to judge, but to give an honest picture of the complicated world that my daughter was born into. Both sides of Sadia's family have faced struggles and behaviors that made things even more challenging for me and Sadia's mother as parents. And my goal in sharing this is not to attack anyone, but to help people understand the challenges my daughter faced from the very beginning and the obstacles I've worked to overcome as her father. One of the things that I noticed when we first started talking and throughout the years is she would always cry in like a group setting. And the reason why she was crying, she wouldn't talk about it. She would just cry and have everybody surround her. This wasn't like a red flag to me. I didn't see anything wrong with it. I felt bad. I don't know what's bothering her, but we're gonna figure this out. We're gonna get through this together. And I learned that it wasn't just when she was with me. This also was something that happened when she was in high school. Moving forward, I started noticing the crying in group settings was one thing, but then depending on if she's in the workplace, if she's at some type of business or a place that she's trying to get something and she's being told no, she would just make herself cry in order to get what she wanted. And then I noticed she started making little like jokes about it. She was going into this one establishment and I was just like, well, what if they say no? And she said, that's all right. I'll just work up some waterworks. And, at that time, it was just funny to me. I was just like, it was funny because, it never affected me in a negative way until we went to court. When we went to court, that's when I started kind of putting it all together. Like she's doing this to manipulate people. And, there's a number of times we were in court and she would start crying when she's caught in a lie. And it worked. There's a number of times that she was able to get off the stand because she started crying. And the one judge even said to me the one day, he was like, look at her. She's clearly scared of you. And I was like, Your Honor, she's crying because she just got caught in a lie. I have evidence right here showing that she's lying, and that's why she just started crying. I already knew beforehand that she was very manipulative, and she was also dealing with some type of anger and trauma. And I continue to try my best to help her with these situations. And I always talk to her to figure out what's bothering her. I know one of the things that was bothering her was her relationship with her biological father. I reconnected them together. They were talking for a little bit, but then the relationship just kind of faded away. So the next thing that I realized was a big part of what she was dealing with had to do with her mother. The first time I ever even met her mom was her sister called her while she was with me, and she was like, hurry up and get home. Mommy's trying to stab daddy. So she told me to come with her. The dad's just standing down in the kitchen, not saying anything. And the mom is upstairs just screaming on the top of her lungs nonstop. And there's a steak knife on the kitchen floor. And it was very awkward to have met her parents for the first time in this way. And on that day, I didn't meet her mom. I just heard her mom yelling. The next incident where one of my mom's boyfriends had seen her mom and was telling me that, like, he was talking to her at one point. He started explaining the whole house, like how her house was set up, how it looked in her bedroom. And he was pretty much telling me that when they worked together, she used to always talk bad about her husband and how much she, wanted to get away from him and didn't want to be with him. I shared this information with Sonny, and I was in a tough position. I wanted to, I didn't know if I should or not, but I did. And she questioned her mom about it. And her mom just started laughing hysterically. And even when, she showed her mom the picture of Harvey, she just denied even knowing him. She pretty much said she never seen him before. Moving forward, another thing that I noticed was Sonny continuously had issues with work. She never really stayed at a job for too long. And anytime she was at the job, there'd be constant conflict with different people within the workplace. And I'm not going to go into all the detail, but there was one example of she was having issues with a boss at work, and one of the things her mother told her to do was to take an orange peel and get a piece of paper and write her boss's name on the paper and put the paper inside the orange peel and put the orange peel underneath her sock on her foot, wear that to work every day. And that was like her way of casting some type of spell on the boss. One of the other issues that she was dealing with was not wanting to be in this area. Places that we relocated to was South Carolina. When we moved to South Carolina, life was great. After a while, it just kind of, went back to some of the same patterns. The manipulation, that was just something that it seemed like she just did naturally. She could just make herself cry to get what she wants in certain situations. But the crying in front of groups of people, that's what disturbed my mind the most. There's never really a group of people in front of the place that we lived. But this specific night, there was a group of men. Some of them lived in the building, some of them had friends over, and it was people from another building that was all out front. And she was just out on the balcony. Everything was fine. We at that point in time, I remember there was nothing we were arguing about, in the prior days, and everything was cool. And I get a knock on the door, and my friend started asking me like if everything was all right. And I'm just like, yeah, why? What's going on? And he's like, your wife is out on the balcony crying. And mind you, she has the door closed, and she just went out there with a book. And she just went out there, and I thought she was out there like reading a book. But the group of men are standing like below, and she's like crying out loud so that they can hear her. And she's getting mad at me, and I'm just like, I'm not saying that you can't be free to do what you want, but I mean, it's a little, it's inappropriate for you to be out on the porch crying, and you got these people thinking that there's something wrong, and they're knocking on the door. So this isn't the first time that someone approached me about Sonny crying in group settings. This is something that happened 4 different times. So he was the fourth person at this time. He was the fourth person that approached me about this. So it is starting to affect our relationship more and more. I noticed we just kept having these issues of not being able to get through any problems. It's like a issue will come up. Sometimes there won't be no issue at all, and she'd be silent for days. And then when I figure out what she's silent about, it's a minor little misunderstanding, and it's like we just wasted, days of our life. Not you not saying nothing to me and not communicating with me about what you're upset about, and then we come to find out it's something so minor that could have easily been resolved if we had just talked about it. So the issues so we got through that part, and the whole goal was to let's, no matter how big, no matter how small the issue is, let's try to talk about it. And so the next phase was, we're talking and we're almost getting through the problem, and she would just, lash out and get really upset, screaming and yelling. I would also start screaming and yelling, and we just wouldn't get anywhere. We were back to square one. And, I know that I couldn't do it by myself. So I started reaching out to other people. The pastor is one person, the pastor that we met down in South Carolina. He's one person that I would reach out to. Another person I tried to reach out to was Sonny's stepfather, where he never got back to me. I figured that, maybe he could give me some tips, how to deal with the problems that we're facing. And the other person I reached out to was my father, and not my biological father. This is my stepfather, who I grew up with most of my life, and this is the father of my younger brother and sister. And I've always thought that, when he came around, I've always thought that he was also my father. I didn't know that that wasn't my real father until, you know um later in life. And then I actually did connect with my real father when I was around 21. So when I reached out to him, he was just, explaining, he talked to both of us, and, he gave us some really good advice. And one of the things we started doing when we're talking and either one of us get upset, let's just back off of the conversation and not continue to talk. Let's just take a few minutes to breathe and just, back off the conversation and come back when we both, calm down a little bit. So that was working really well. It was working really well, and we were doing good for a little while. But then it seemed as if she kind of slipped back into her old habits, and she just didn't have patience for it anymore. It got to the point to where, like, she not now. One of her biggest problems with me was when we do start yelling at each other, I'm using profanity, and specifically I call her the B word when we get, real heated towards each other. And I took full accountability for that. And I grew up in a culture and in a family to where that was a normal way of communicating with people when you're upset and when you're mad. So that's something that, I worked on, and I want to be a better person. So I want to change some of this old programming that I have, and live my life in a more healthy manner and have a healthier relationships and treat people in a healthy way, even when I'm upset. One of the things that I noticed started happening was she started getting very impatient with the way that we have been communicating. And we got through a few issues, and it was like, I was like, yes, like, I was happy that it's working. And I noticed she started just slipping back into her old ways. And while I'm still trying to just be this person that, is not going to go back to the toxic way of communicating, it was, it's almost if it was bothering her that I wouldn't yell back at her. So what started happening next was she started becoming physically abusive. I mean, she has always lashed out and started getting physical with me, from when we were in Pennsylvania. But this was like once in a blue. It wasn't often. But now this is like every couple weeks she's becoming physically abusive with me, and she doesn't want to talk about anything anymore. We start talking about things, and we get upset, and we back off the conversation, and she's just like, F you, I don't want to talk about it later. I'm done talking about it. And that's when I just started feeling defeated, like I don't know what else to do. Another thing that was happening during the times that we were, arguing back and forth is she would always tell me that I said things that I really don't remember saying. A lot of the stuff I would just accept. Like, I know I don't have the sharpest memory, so I'm not going to challenge, if you're saying I said this, I'm just going to have to trust that you remember better than me what I said. And I accepted it for a while until I noticed some of the things that she was saying, it just wasn't in my character. So what I started doing was I started journaling, and I literally started writing down some of these things we were getting into arguments about. And she did it again, and she's saying that I said these things, and I actually have the journal of what I said and what was said. And I noticed that she was like playing with my mind. Still to this day, I don't know if she's willfully doing it or she's doing it unconsciously. So I know the first few times that I've realized, that I was being manipulated and being told that I said things that I know I didn't say. Once I started journaling, I pretty much I just let it continue for a little while. I let it continue for a few months. And then I came and I showed evidence. I didn't just let it happen one time. I let it happen about 3 times before I actually came out and showed her, look, you said I said this, and I've been writing in my journal, this is what I actually said. Then you said I said this. This is what I actually said. And at that time, my entire life with her just kind of flashed before my eyes, and I just started questioning, like, how many times did this happen? Because I know there was a number of times where I was just sitting there, puzzled and, beating myself up over, not remembering something so, crucial to what we were arguing about. And it was really,
bothering me at the time because, I want to take accountability for my actions. So now I find out I'm taking accountability for things that just didn't exist. That made my head spin. That was something that I've never really dealt with to that extent. So I grew up in an environment around, manipulative people and cruel people. And, I've experienced a lot of different things, but just not to this extent to where I, continue to question my own sanity. The longer we're together, the more things I'm starting to see that, it's just, I'm starting to feel like this is one of the most difficult relationships that I've ever been in. So, still, even with all this stuff going on, I'm still like, I'm not gonna submit and be this guy that just takes the abuse. I'm gonna try to do everything to keep my family together. But then I find out that she's talking to somebody else while I'm at work, and it's supposedly on some type of dating website. And she was telling somebody that she just gets lonely. She's always there by herself, and I'm gone all day, which I did start working two jobs. So that's when I kind of was like, I drew the line, and I'm just like, this is something that I won't accept. This is something that's like a complete deal breaker. I don't care, you know what everything else, I'm willing to deal with. This is something that I'm not willing to deal with, and it's also dangerous. So at this point, I'm like, now I'm just like, all right, so if we're not going to be together, let's just move back to Pennsylvania. And now I don't really know what's going to happen, but things seem like they kind of calmed down for a little bit, and we were getting along. It seemed like we were getting along pretty good. And this is 2 years now that we're in South Carolina, and 2 years in, she even got a job. So I believe it was in November when she actually started working. So around this time when she started working, I noticed she kept on like picking fights for no reason. And that was just like out of the ordinary because normally when we're arguing, it starts with something, something starts, but now she's just like creating problems when there doesn't have to be any problems. And that was a little confusing for me. So this one particular argument, this is like the third time within the last couple months that she's telling me to get out of the house. The previous time she told me to leave the house, I would just go to my job, sleep in the parking lot in my car, wake up the next day and just go to work. So this day when she told me to leave, I took her iPod. I knew it was going to piss her off, but at the time I was pissed off and I just made problems worse. So when I grabbed her iPod, I took her iPod on my way out the door, and she realized I took it, and she ran up and grabbed my hand, and she bit my hand really hard. And I yanked my hand out of her mouth, and she had like a little bubble on the inside of her lip. And the first thing she did was run right to the bathroom and take like 20 pictures of that one little bubble behind her lip. And I'm in the living room and my hand is like dripping blood. Like it's literally dripping. I've never dripped blood like that bad in my life. And she calls the cops. And the police just, they obviously seen my hand dripping blood, and they seen her little bubble on the inside of her lip. There was no charges filed on either on her or on me. So a week or 2 weeks in, now we're around Christmas time. And, at this point, I don't really know, like, things have been real calm in the house. And she went to work, and, I cooked Christmas dinner. I was really excited to be spending the second Christmas with my daughter and with her mom. Despite all the issues, this was, it was coming into a new year, and I wasn't sure what our future held, but, I was just trying to stay positive and trying to do the best that I could do. I believe it was a day after Christmas. I came home and she was gone with Sadia. A few days later, she comes to the house with some lady at work from work, and the lady brought her husband. And this lady was thinking that she was in some type of abusive relationship. And when I was talking to the lady, I said her only problem with me was the way that I talk to her when we get into arguments. If she's telling you that she's in an abusive relationship, she's lying to you. That on her lip, I said I did not hit her. She bit me, and that's how that happened to her lip. I yanked my hand out of her mouth, and the lady was just like, "Look, I don't know what's going on. I just see her coming to work. Some days she's real sad. Some days she's real happy, and I don't know. You know, I just try to talk to her and figure out what's wrong." And I was like, I was telling, I was like, "Sonny, can we please just talk? Like, I don't know what you're doing, where you're taking my daughter. I don't know who these people are. You just met these people, and you took my daughter, and you're living with strangers now." And she's just, packing up her clothes, and she's in the filing cabinet getting, all Dee Dee's paperwork. And the lady the lady was kind of looking at her when I was telling the story. She's now getting part B of the story. So she definitely, based on what the lady's reactions and her responses, she was deceiving the lady into thinking she was in an abusive relationship. So the lady did tell her, like, listen, why don't you just go in the back room and talk to him before you just leave and come back to my house. Sadia was so confused as she took her out of the house, and she brought her to live, took her away from her dad and brought her to live with complete strangers. So Sadia, as we're talking, Sadia grabbed my head and she grabbed the back of her head, and she was pushing our heads together and trying to like force us to kiss, like just pretty much saying like, I want y'all to stop fighting. I want things to go back to normal. And it was very emotional for me to see her doing that. And her mom just scolded her and says, "Stop, Sadia, you're ripping my earring out." And Sadia just like jumped back. So another thing that I'm talking to her about is the fact that like all the bills were in her name. So what she did was she didn't only just take Sadia and leave, but she got the electric cut off, and then she went to the office of the apartment complex we were living in. She handed them the key and said she was leaving. So not only is did she take my daughter, but she left me in here with no lights and also handed in the key. So, she ends up leaving again with these strangers, taking my daughter. The people from the apartment complex, next thing you know, they're knocking on the door. All the food in the fridge is spoiled. And I'm just, at this point, I'm just like, I like, I'm just devastated at this point. This is like the most traumatic thing that I've ever dealt with. Just couldn't wrap my mind around why she would react in this type of way. It's not like she was actually being abused. Like, if anything, she was the abuser. I pretty much have to come up with, a plan to, like, where am I going to live? Now these people are coming over here saying like, what are you doing here? She gave back the key, we have to get this place cleaned out to rent out. And I don't know what she's doing. I'm not sure, if she's going back to Pennsylvania. I don't know if she's going to just live down here. And I just didn't know what I was about to do. I had neighbors, and they all were looking out for me. And, the lady downstairs was bringing me plates of food, and really good people, the people that lived around me. And they were very supportive during that time. And, it just kept getting harder and harder for me, not knowing, where my daughter is at, not knowing what she plans to do, not knowing anything. And, I'm used to coming home and opening the door from work and my baby girl running up to me and giving me a hug. And, now I'm walking into a house that's just destroyed. There's no lights. I can't go to the fridge. I can't cook anything. It's freezing cold. There's no way to heat the house besides the candles that I have lit. And every single day, my daughter's scent is just fading away. And that alone, her scent fading away was just, it was driving me crazy. One day I got a call from one of my sisters who told me that she was back in Pennsylvania. They just seen her. So this was like 2 weeks later after Christmas. She's back in Pennsylvania. Or it could have been about 3 weeks after Christmas, she was back in Pennsylvania. So as I just sell everything in the house. I pack up my truck. and take as much as I could bring with me. And I start traveling back to Pennsylvania. She was down there. I remember it was on my birthday and I was contacting her. My birthday is January 10th, and I was contacting her and say, can you please, bring Sadia to this restaurant, or allow me to come pick her up to this restaurant, and one of her favorite restaurant that she loved to go to. I said I would just like to spend my birthday with her. And it was she wasn't letting me see my daughter anymore. And so when I found out she was in Pennsylvania, I got, right on the road. I was right on the road within a couple of days driving back to Pennsylvania. The first thing I did after she wouldn't let me see her was I went and filed for custody. And as soon as I filed for custody, that's when she filed for the PFA. When we went to the PFA hearing, she brought all the pictures from that one incident where she had the little bubble behind her lip. So the judge is looking through all the pictures, and then he says, where's the dates for these pictures? Like, did this all happen over a course of a few years? So I was explaining to him, Your Honor, these are all of the same pictures. Some of them have different lighting. Some of them were taken in different location, but that's all from one incident. And in that incident, I was the one that was hurt.